Hello and welcome to CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. So before we begin, if you have not done this already, and I know I said this in our last video, make sure that either the lessons folder is in the local folder on the Mac. It could be the local or the network. I'm pretty sure it would be the local though. And if not, that you have downloaded the Dreamweaver files folder on Moodle, and that's in the top section of our course. So once we talk about CSS, and if you're extremely confused by it, there's some fun things you can do with it. This website here, this YouTube video goes through how to work this website, and this is a really fun little website where you learn how to write code. So again, if you're one of those codies who really wants to get into this, this is available to you. So cascading style sheets. A style sheet language used for describing the look and formatting of a document written up in the markup language, meaning HTML. Okay? So CSS defines how HTML elements are displayed. The HTML elements are the words, the CSS is the pretty. That's how you remember it. HTML was never intended to contain tags for formatting. It's only ever been a language. As you see here, this is a header, this is a paragraph. So style definitions are normally saved as external or .css files. So as what we did with HTML, it's .html, this is .css. All right, so this is what a tag looks like. As you see up here, it says inline and then it says embedded, okay? Inline means right there within the HTML code, we're adding something, right? So here's the H1, right? We want to add a style to it. So the H1 is called the selector. It's the thing we're going to do something to, right? And the rest of this over here is called the declaration. So you're going to select something and declare something upon it. Right here, you have the property. It's going to be color. That's our property. That's what we want to declare on this selection. And what is the color? It's the value. So the actual thing you're doing, color, is the property, and blue, or whatever the color is we're using, is the value. And then we add margin left here. So margin would be the property and left would be the value. Left 30 pixels would be the value. So that's what that looks like inline. Then there's the embedded tag. And what this does is does a whole section or a whole page or a whole site, unless you make a change to it in your website of something you want. So this A over here, this is considered the selector, and the declaration is what's between these two. See, declaration start, declaration end, all this stuff in the middle, just like up here, is the declaration. The property is the background color, and the value is yellow, okay? Or whatever that color is. So just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what it looks like. And as you see, asterisk, asterisk, might have to fill those in. So now we're going to have some fun. We're going to launch Dreamweaver, and we're going to open up the HTML_format.html file. That is either in lesson 3 in the lessons folder, or if you've downloaded them from Moodle, it's just its own file name. So let's start by navigating there. So here I've opened up Dreamweaver again, which you should be doing as well. And remember, we hit the welcome screen, we close that out. If it's not there, set it up so that it's your space. Remember how we did that in our last video? Now you're all set to go here. Okay, now the first thing I want you to do is go to File, Open, and find HTML_formatting.html. That's in lesson 3 folder, or just in your folder. So I have to go to lesson 3, and then I'm going to HTML_formatting.html. Let's open that up and take a look. Okay, if you're not already there, make sure you go to split screen, which is here, not code, because look what we have there. Woo! We want to be in split screen here, okay? And I want you to change the color. Well, first of all, highlight Rosencrantz. Okay, so let's just highlight the name Rosencrantz, right? See it right down there? Now I want you to change the color blue. So you can come right over here. It tells you where you are. Let me show you that again. So I'm going to highlight Rosencrantz. Oh, there it is. It's coming up on this side too. And then I'm going to change this word to green. And then I'm going to click back over here. Look at that. Turned green for me right away. Okay, so now open the CSS formatting. Now you don't have to close this one. Watch. Just go to File, Open. We're going to go right back to where we were, but we're going to do CSS formatting instead. Okay, open that one now. Now you notice they came up next to each other. See how that works? I can click back and forth between them. But this is CSS formatting. It's done a little differently. As you can see, it says style type, and it just looks different. See, style open, style closed. It's not within the Rosencrantz. So what we want to do is in style type up here, we want to change the color blue to green. Okay, and then click over here. And what does that do? It takes all the H1s on the entire page. Not like this one where we did just one. We just changed it for this one guy. It takes all of the H1s on the entire page anytime you have put in an H1, and it turns them green or does whatever it asks of you. So that's the basic difference between CSS and HTML. CSS formats. It takes over the entire look of the page, okay? Now, let's open the HTML defaults. Just keep opening. Don't worry about closing anything. HTML defaults. And this is what defaults look like. There are several things that are just nature in HTML and CSS, and some of it is defaults. Like it always defaults to a white background with black words. Okay, the headers all look similar to this unless you change them. We go horizontal to vertical and left to right, the way Americans read. And the font is always in black unless you change it. So that's just showing you what the defaults are in HTML. So you will go in and change anything that you want to look differently. So the browser reads the HTML code and interprets and displays it. That makes total sense, right? The CSS steps between the HTML and the browser to redefine the elements and how they should be rendered. So here you go, asterisk. CSS creates an imaginary box around each element and then enables you to format almost every aspect of how that box will display. Okay, so now we're going to open box model HTML. Let me move back over here. Remember, you don't need to close. We're just going to keep open. It doesn't hurt anything. Let's go to box model HTML and see how things are displayed. So check out how this styling sheet works. Highlight and delete all the CSS information from style to style, okay? So here's open style, here's closed style. I'm just going to take everything and I'm going to get rid of it. And then I'm going to click back out. So that's what it looks like without the CSS. Before you put in all the pretty, that's what you get. And that's just kind of giving you an idea of how that works. So our best friend, edit, undo, goes right back again. Remember that if you're not Mac savvy, edit undo is your best friend. It'll always take care of you. And Command S or save is also your best friend when you want to make sure you don't lose anything. So now it gets a little more complicated. I'm going to go back over here to our little friendly. Hope this works for you guys. CSS formatting is applied in 3 ways. It's applied inline. Let me make this big so we can do it. Talk for a minute. Inline, meaning within that HTML element, meaning like H1 to close H1, and you put in, you want it to be a certain color. That's inline. Embedded inside of that page on the top there, or linked as an external style sheet, which we'll get into a little later, that controls all aspects of the entire website. So CSS formatting is called a rule. And we just talked about this. The rule has 2 parts, the selector and the declaration. Remember, we looked at that picture, okay? CSS can define an HTML element or define 2 custom selector modifiers called class or ID. Don't get too worried about that. It's just telling you that you can do an entire class, like everything on the website that has an H1 is blue. Or you can do an ID where only certain things happen. So it's just letting you know that it's a very complex language and there's a lot of different things you can do. So CSS rules can affect single words or paragraphs, affect the entire page, or specifically begin and end abruptly. So we can do pretty much whatever we want if we know the code. Okay. CSS has 4 theories. And they sound and seem much more complicated than they are. So we're going to go through them on our Dreamweaver so you can see what it means. So cascade theory, how order and placement of rules on a style sheet affects the application. Where they are affects how they work. Okay, so we're going to go back over here again to our Dreamweaver. And we're going to open cascade.html. So let's file open cascade.html right here. So notice that when you look at the codes on H1, there are 2 different colors declared. So right here, look, H1. There's H1 is supposed to be blue. Nope, H1 is supposed to be red. Well, the second rule is the last one declared, which makes it closest to the actual content. So whatever is the last thing written is what takes over. So watch, if I change this to green, well, absolutely nothing happens. But if I change this to pink, hold on, no caps. Will pink work? Yep, pink works. Okay, some of the words don't get recognized, so I have to look at it. So remember, it's always the last thing in the series. If there's 25 H1s and they each have a color, it's the very last one, and that's called cascading theory. The next theory is called the inheritance theory, and this theory describes how one rule can be affected by previous declarations. So they inherit something. So let's take a look at it over here. So open up inheritance.html, which I've already done. And if we look over here, the H1, there are 2 things under H1, but they're not competing, are they? One's a font family and one's a color. So they both get used. But if you look below, look, H2, H3, and P, paragraph, all have the same thing written. Do we really need all of that? No, we can use the inheritance theory. We then change this, let's just pick this one, to, it's called the div. You'll probably have heard div before. Now we can get rid of these, because what it's saying is that everything is in this division, in this style, is going to be blue with Verdana. Okay, let's see if it changes anything. Well, look at that. It stays exactly the same, because we just made one rule for everybody. We could have even done it above here, but I wanted to show you how those 2 work. So that's the inheritance theory. Our third theory is called the descendant theory. And this one confuses people, but think of it as they are a descendant of that specific area. So we're going to go over here. I've already opened mine for you. And we're going to look at the H1 here, okay? The H1 is right here is just a regular H1, and we're telling it the font family and the color. The second one has a div connected to it, so everything within that space becomes a, red with impact. And the other one is a product H1, a div product, which is a little bit more complex in its positioning. But we're going to look at these first two here, okay? We're just going to take, okay, so here's the H1, right? We're going to take that H1, I'm going to copy it just to give you an example. And I'm going to put it within the div of the second one, okay? So before the close of the div of this one. And then I'm going to click over here. See what happens? It stays red because over here, even though H1 is blue, it became a descendant of what's inside the other div. And that's pretty much what you need to know about the descendant theory. This final theory is the specificity theory, and I can't say that, and I defy you to say that. But we're just going to take a quick look at this one. This is a pretty easy one, and it's just to give you some explanation. So what it's saying is, you see these little, what is it, a forward slash and an asterisk? Whatever's between these two things, see, it has all of the CSS, right? They seem to be grayed out. That's because these two things mean ignore it. We're not listening to it in this section, right? So I'm going to delete those, and we're going to see what happens when I do. Well, look at that. It brings it all back again. So you want to remember the one thing about specificity theory is that it has those little asterisk and close or sideways slash things on it. And if you remove those, it comes back to you. It comes back in full color. And that's theories. So now we're going to talk about how we can manipulate in CSS, specifically starting with the width right here and the way different widths work within CSS and in Dreamweaver. So we're going to the width.html, and this is what it looks like, and this is the CSS. So the first box is within the normal CSS, and that's 100%. It's 100% of the size of the site is there. Box 2, we're only going to say we want it to be width 50%. Box 3 is 200 pixels, which means it remains 200 pixels no matter how big the size of the screen it's showing on, which could be a problem. And 10 EMs for the fourth box. An EM is a measurement in CSS language, and I actually don't know what E and M mean or M means, but we use it. It's just another way of determining how you want to size something, okay? So I'm going to show you a little example here. When I change the size of this, as you can see, box 1 and 2, because they are a percentage of the actual screen, we keep all the information, and it maneuvers itself around. Box 3 was just pixels, didn't work so well, did it? And box 4, the same thing, the M's, they're very constant. So that's just something I wanted to show you about width, and it's something to remember when we move forward, okay? The next thing we're going to talk about is margins and padding. So go to the margins_padding HTML, and we're going to make a little adjustment here. I opened it on mine already. We're going to add a div tag here because this is, whew, that's hard to read, all right? So first we're going to add a margin, right? Which means we add a div space, and then we do a squiggly line, margin, and you see what comes up here? Isn't this cool? It helps you out. See, I could just click on it, and it starts me already, okay? And I'm going to make this 30 pixels. And then we put the little semicolon, meaning we can add if we want to, but we're not going to right now because we want to see what we do. You can go right here to refresh, and look, that's already looking better. But I think we need some padding in there too, because these outsides are awfully close to the edge. So within that same div, if we go right after the 30, because that means we can add something, right? A semicolon means, ooh, something else can happen. Let's do padding. P-A-D, oh, there it is. Double click on that, and it gives us the colon, meaning, okay, what do you want? How much padding do you want? We're gonna go 30 pixels again and do another semicolon, and then we're gonna refresh. And look at that. It makes it so much better, doesn't it? And it was the div for this section here. So that's how you can work with padding and width. Next, I'll talk about positioning. And something I want to bring up is you're going to hear the word normalization, which to you would mean like the normal way, right? Well, in this business, in web design, normalization means that you're purposely removing the default settings on the project. So that's what we're doing now. We're normalizing. I know that sounds backwards from what it's supposed to be, but that's the way it works. So if you go to positioning.html, you'll see there are 3 divs. They're all the same size here. I mean, 3 boxes, sorry. And they're all within this div. Well, let's play around a little bit. Let's change the pixels to 30. Okay, go down and hit refresh. Okay, they're much smaller, right? Now let's change, that's their height. Where's their, what else do I want to change? I want to change their float to left. Oh, they all go together because they're all moving up and to the left. What if I change their float to right? And refresh. They all move to the right side and they get in line. If we bring the float back to auto, it goes back to the way it was. Auto will reflect down the middle. So that's just another element that we'll be working with, and we will float things right and left, specifically pictures. So it's something good to know. One last thing to share with you this week, and it's about the actual Dreamweaver panel. If we look down at the properties, I remember telling you that that properties was a really important panel, and now you're going to see why. I opened up. Start that again. There's one more thing I wanted to share with you this week, and it's about the Dreamweaver panel. I remember telling you about the properties panel when we set up and how important it was, and I'm going to show you now why that is. So I've opened up the start here HTML just as a reference. So if you look in the properties panel, on the left there are 2 things, HTML and CSS. Important to know, because sometimes you'll be working on something and you'll say, it's not working. It's like, well, you're in CSS. You're supposed to be in HTML. So that's something to look at. But let's just say I want to bold one word here. And I don't really feel like dealing with the code because Dreamweaver will help me. I'll take 2 words. And I want to, helps if I get the whole word, there you go, bold it, italicize it. There you go, look, strong and EM were both put in the code for me because Dreamweaver tells it to do that. Now let's go to the CSS and let's see, let's ride down, pick one of these out. So we're going to click here and I want to change the background color. So BG, background, let's change it to bright yellow. Yowzer. Okay, that works. Let's do another one. Let's change that one to yellow too. So within this panel, there's a whole lot of cool stuff we can do. We can also look at what elements are. Let's look at this whole thing here. Okay, this is the title. It's a banner and it has a picture in it. And we can look right down here and it tells us where that image came from, the size of it, and it's part of a container, which we'll get into in another section. So I just wanted you to have an idea specifically of that HTML and CSS can be done right down in this area, and that we can make changes without actually writing code. After I make you write code, and then I tell you it can be done without writing code. But you still have to know the code. So that's it for this week. Your homework is a CSS practice. You'll go through each of these steps that I give you. If you want to look up examples, they're found here. If you want to know color codes, you can find them here or just Google them. You'll find them everywhere. So you're going to copy and paste this code into a text edit and play around with it. And then at the bottom here, you're going to add it to last week's project. And you'll see my example at the bottom here of how I changed my code. So I hope it works well for you. If you have any problems, just let me know.